This is the Portside Pod, the official podcast of the Stockton Ports. I'm your host and voice of the Ports, Alex Jensen, and on today's episode, we catch up with a couple of members of the 2021 Ports pitching staff in Kumar Nambiar and Jake Walkinshaw. Joined by a couple of members of the 2021 Ports pitching staff, Kumar Nambiar, Jake Walkinshaw, from all the way back east. Fellas, thanks for taking the time. And just talking before we hit record, you guys can't get enough of each other, right? I mean, you went straight from the season to working out together this off season. But thanks for joining me, fellas. It's good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Alex.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's great to see your face again, and yeah, hope we talk some ports.
Yeah, you guys too. How did that all come about? Working out. You guys were roommates too during the season, right, in Stockton. So how did that come about? Just working out together, and what do those workouts look like during the off season?
Yeah, so I've been training at this place called ATP, Advanced Therapy and Performance, for a few years now, and it's in Stamford, Connecticut, which is fairly close to where Kumar lives. So obviously, and I do some work for them too. So I feel like I was always kind of in his ear about it. And over COVID, a bunch of those guys, we had like a live ABs thing going on. And Kumar came to that, so we got introduced to a few of the guys and everything like that. And then you were spending your off season in Mass the past couple of years, right?
Right. Yeah. So last summer during COVID, everyone was back home, so I was home with my parents in New York. And I remember you texted me, and you're like, "We're getting some live at bats together." And I had just been thrown in my backyard with my brother, whoever I could find, and so that was huge because I got to go hang out with the group for the first time in a while and actually play some baseball. And then all summer, Jake and I lived together. So it was like, Kumar, when you get home, you should come train at ATP, come work out with us. And then I got home and it was perfect. They were moving into a new facility. Obviously, I'd heard about them all summer from Jake, and I'd seen stuff in the past. So it was perfect for me. It was about 25 minutes from home. Great group of guys. Trainers are great there. And it was a wonderful, almost 2 months actually. So yeah, I'll definitely be back at some point when I'm home in New York again.
Yeah, we tried to keep him there, but unfortunately, we couldn't compete with the weather down in Florida.
Yeah, now Kumar. So Jake, you mentioned you're at home in Connecticut. Kumar, you're down in Florida. It's nice. I mean, we were just talking, right? I mean, you guys have gotten hammered northeast by the weather. It's nice to be in the sunshine and a little bit of humidity, right?
Yeah, it's been really nice. It's about 75 and sunny. It's been raining a little bit here and there, but every morning I wake up to a screenshot of a weather app from my mom saying, Kumar, you're pretty lucky. It'll be like New York 15 degrees or 18 degrees, and then Florida 70 with a sunny emoji. So yeah, it's been a good time down here. The beaches are beautiful, and just waking up and having warm weather has been a blessing.
Jake, how do you navigate around the weather? Right now, you just told me that you got outside to throw for the first time in a few weeks, a couple of days ago. I mean, you're used to it now. So how do you kind of negotiate that?
Yeah, I think the one thing I've learned is to like be flexible with my throwing program. So like I tend to try to follow the program as much as I can, but like if I know that there's going to be a great, beautiful day outside, I'll make sure I schedule a nice long toss around that day. So I think the worst is like when you're scheduled to throw a bullpen or something, or maybe like a super light throwing day, and all of a sudden you walk outside in the morning and it's 50 degrees in January. And you're like, man, I really wish I could be long tossing. So like, I think that I'm always constantly looking at the weather and planning out like for the week, like, okay, Friday's going to be nice. I'm long tossing on Friday and I'll work everything else around that. And that's kind of my key. And then learning how to long toss into a net inside. That's, kind of been the MO for the past couple of years.
So I guess that kind of, takes us right into like the next talking point here, which is your off-season throwing programs. I mean, is that something that looks the same for every guy in the organization? Do each of you have a specific plan for yourselves? Is it something that, you're doing on your own? What are your throwing programs? And how do those change from the season to the off season? And you could even take that into like weight training, conditioning. How does it differentiate between the off season and, when you're trying to stay in shape during the grind of the season?
Yeah, I think everyone's throwing program is similar in a certain extent. It's typically 3 or 4 heavy days of throwing once you get your arm built up and things like that. But I really think things start to change once the new year hits. Once January rolls around, bullpens start to ramp up. You're throwing a little more. You might even kind of tone it back in the weight room a little bit. I know before the new year, I was weightlifting 4 days a week with conditioning a couple of days, and now it's 3 days of lifting and 3 days of conditioning, just because throwing is increasing. And we kind of don't want the workload of the weight room to be intense as well as throwing. So it's kind of just a little mix of both. But I'm sure Jake's can talk about that as well. He's been throwing bullpens for a little bit. I'm about to start soon. So
yeah, I think everybody, like you said, is pretty similar. I think the A's do a good job knowing that we're going home and we're going to be around trainers that we trust, that we've worked with since before we got drafted. And they're really open to us utilizing them. I know some organizations want you to do their strength program specifically, but I think the A's are really smart in the fact that they know that they're not going to see us in person for 4 months. So let professionals that we trust, as long as we talk to them and we're in constant communication with the A's training staff. And I know they've reached out to my trainers back in Connecticut just to kind of get some feedback, see what I'm doing, kind of give their thoughts and kind of work together to help guys through their training. And I think that helps when we get back to spring training. Everybody got like the personalized plan that they needed and then once we get to spring training, then we get hands-on with our strength coaches out in Arizona. So I think it works out well like that.
Yeah, that's it. So it sounds like the A's kind of let you guys do your own thing during the off season. Like, what works best for your bodies, clearly. Do I have that wrong there? I mean, clearly you don't want to show up to spring training out of shape, right? I mean, that's a good way to earn a bad reputation, but that's kind of what it sounds like, right? Is the A's kind of trust you to do your own thing and stay in shape. Is that right?
I think it is like that. I think it varies from guy to guy. The A's definitely have their plan because their strength coaches and obviously all of their staff are super knowledgeable. But for the number of guys that they have, it's impossible to know exactly what everyone's doing at all times throughout the offseason. It just logistically doesn't make sense. So I think it just makes more sense to kind of hand guys off to, like Jake said, trainers that have known us for a long time, since before we got drafted and things like that. But they're always, we're in constant contact with them throughout the offseason, and they're always there for suggestions and questions and things like that, because obviously when season comes around, we're going to be working strictly with them and not with the trainers we're working with in the off season. So
you mentioned doing some live ABs at that facility, Jake, for the both of you guys. During the off season, how much do you guys kind of like to mix that in with just, working on stuff in just a bullpen? Like, how often do you like facing a live hitter or even a guy standing in? Like, how does that help you?
Yeah, I think last off season was a little different because spring training was a lot later, and we also didn't know. So we were told to prepare for that beginning of March normal time, but then it ended up we didn't report until April 1st. So I think last year I probably did more live ABs than I'll do this off season. I was probably doing live ABs for 6 weeks or so. This year I'll probably face hitters for around 2 weeks before I go down. And that's just more to feel comfortable when I get down to spring training. I think that even as I'm building up, I'll probably have hitters start to stand in if they're around and want to. And I think it just helps you feel more comfortable so that when you get to spring training and there's really good hitters in the box, it's not the first time that you're seeing that for the year.
Yeah, I'll say I remember this very clearly. When I stepped on the mound in Modesto for my first outing this past year, I was so anxious and so nervous. And I had done about 4 to 5 outings of live ABs and had faced hitters and a bunch of guys that were levels way higher than low A. And that feeling when the first batter stepped in was nothing like any of the live at bats. So I plan on doing live at bats, but I'm still ready for the first moment with the coach with eyes on me and a batter in a different uniform to kind of shake me a little bit.
Yeah, you can't simulate actual competition, right? I mean, you can have a guy in there, but you can't simulate that intensity, right? The intensity of an actual game.
Exactly, and live ABs are typically with guys you've been working out with all off season, your friends, and then when you see a guy in a different uniform, it's a different type of feeling. You
guys, you talked about getting in there facing hitters that are better than low A West or low A whatever. I mean, I guess they're going to call it single A West now. I'm not sure. Hopefully you guys don't. You guys are above that going into next season. But give me a name. Who's the best? Who's the toughest hitter you've faced, or biggest name, or however you guys want to take that in spring training, in college, in the regular season. even a guy, you know, standing in the off season, whatever, if he's taking a live AB off you, just give me a name if you guys are comfortable doing
that. Jake, you got anyone that comes to mind? I'm trying to think.
I'm trying. I mean,
like, do you guys face big leaguers at all at spring training, or I guess this past year they were pretty much gone by the time you got there, right?
Yeah,
we had separate
this year. I mean, I remember that San Jose Giants lineup was full of some names,
especially at the beginning of the year, right? Those first couple series.
Yeah, they had some. Those are some big names. Those are some big prospects. Trying to think.
I think for me it was probably AJ Pollock. I mean, he was an all-star, but that wasn't
live
right. That was in the middle. That was at Rancho. That was in the middle of the season. So I don't think I faced any big leaguers in the off season or in spring training.
Yeah, no, I think during those live ABs we had, I think like the at bat that I definitely got the most fired up for was a kid, Tom Malone, who was like a AA, AAA guy with the Yankees the past year or two, and then he just signed a deal with the Padres. And, you know, he was a year older than me and big deal coming out of high school, you know, 3rd round pick. And so I knew who he was for about 7 years. And then I get to face him on a middle school field in Connecticut in the summer. And it was like the first time I was like, you know, I'm like, all right, let's do this. You know, meanwhile, half of the other ABs I was facing Division 1, 2, 3 college kids, a couple high school kids, and then all of a sudden this AAA guy for my favorite team growing up, who, you know, was a big deal in Connecticut. That was probably, as far as live ABs go, the biggest name.
What would you say, like, you know, facing Pollock or facing a guy like Malone? What would you say the biggest difference is between like low A hitters and guys that are on the cusp of the big leagues or in the big leagues like that? What makes them tougher to get out?
We joke around that low A was the hardest league to pitch in sometimes, but I'll say just the mistakes. I think in low A throughout the year, you could get away with a few more mistakes, fastball over the middle, breaking ball up later in the count, things like that. And I obviously haven't had a ton of experience against high level guys, but just from watching TV and stuff like that, they hammer mistakes. And as we continue to progress, those are things that we hopefully try to improve on, right? You try to limit the fastballs that are in the heart of the zone or the breaking balls that you leave up and things like that.
Yeah, and I think for me, like the approaches and the consistency that upper level hitters show is something that we didn't see a ton of in low A. The talent is obvious for these guys, but sometimes it could hurt you as a pitcher because you're not getting any free strikes in low A with a fastball. Like guys are they'll swing at a fastball on the corner first pitch. They'll swing at a fastball over the middle first pitch. Like they're just going to look to hammer the fastball. So I think that like Kumar said, sometimes it felt like the toughest league to pitch in. If they were on that day, it just felt like everything you threw, they were just taking hacks at it. And if they were hitting it, it was going to be a long day. Where other days it felt like they would roll over on a first pitch off the plate because they're just ultra aggressive. Where at the upper levels, you might get them to take the first pitch fastball outside because they weren't looking for it, but then you leave one pitch over the middle that maybe they foul off in low A and it's getting hit hard at the upper levels.
Hitters were super aggressive, right? I mean, especially at the beginning of the year. I think Luis Matos swung at every single pitch that he saw, like in the first couple series you guys played him. I mean, you know, did you notice a difference as you went throughout the year? Like guys were starting to learn their approaches more, especially, you know, some of these younger, I'm sure you guys learned about, you know, yourselves a lot too, being your first full season. But did you notice a difference in the hitters' approaches? Like, did you notice some maturation and guys were maybe a little bit tougher to get out, a little less free swinging maybe as the year went along?
I don't know. I thought they were pretty much free swingers. I think eventually scouting reports got out, both on like us as a staff and like what we were trying to do as a whole. And then they made adjustments to that. So then we had to counter that. But I think all throughout the year, the common theme was like how aggressive they were.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Matos. I remember facing him a few times in spring training. And then we obviously played the Giants a bunch. And
right,
I feel like his approach didn't change. He just got to know me better. And over the course of the summer, it just became harder and harder to get him out because I wasn't implementing new things in the middle of the season. I was just obviously working on stuff and trying to improve. But he was seeing my pitches over and over multiple times a month because he was playing every game. And Jake and I were pitching every week, basically. So I think it just got harder as the season went on. And that's part of pro ball, right? That's not something you get to experience in college or anything like that. You have to learn how to get guys out multiple times over the course of a year. And that's why some guys are so successful, because they're able to adjust on the fly and make changes and things like that over the course of 120, 140, 160 games.
You guys both grew up Yankee fans, right? Kumar, I know you're New York guy. Jake, Connecticut. You guys both grew up Yankee fans?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Jake,
it's on there somewhere.
That's in the line. Yeah, I was gonna say I'd be remiss if we didn't mention the wall of hats over your left shoulder. You got any favorites up there?
I think we got one Yankee one. Yeah, we got one still. It's still on there.
Nice.
But,
yeah. When I was in high school, like when I was growing up, the A's and the Yankees had a great rivalry. Like 01, 02, 03, 2000. I think they met in the postseason like 3 out of 4 years, and all those. That was one of the Jeter flip. One of those series was the Jeter flip. I don't know if you guys might be a little too young to remember that, but there was a great rivalry there between the A's and the Yankees.
Yeah, I think I was a little too young. Like, I'll tell myself I remember it, but I think I remember seeing highlights of it because I was probably like 4 or 5 when the Jeter flip play happened. So, yeah, I don't think I actually remember watching it, but
got some Ports hats up there too. Where do you feel like, Jake, the line in Connecticut shifts from New York fandom to New England fandom? Is there one, or is it just kind of like hit and miss?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm definitely I'm like an hour and a half from New York City and like 2.5 hours from Boston.
Okay.
So growing up, I'd say 2/3, 3/4 of my friends, my classmates were all New York fans. I think once you get up towards Hartford, then it starts to feel more like New England, a lot of Pats fans, all that. Where around me, it feels more like the tri-state area, as they call it, like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And
right.
Once you get up northern Connecticut, it feels more like that New England type feel.
Kumar, you got anything to add to that, man? I mean, you're from just north of the city, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, about 30 minutes. That's correct. So grew up going to a lot of Yankees games. But yeah, the last 2 off seasons I've lived just outside of Boston, and I had a few very close high school friends that lived in Boston that I would see a ton. And we all went to high school together, and we're all Yankees fans, and they integrated into their friend group in Boston, and I would always spend time with them. And the 3 of us were Yankees fans and a group of Boston fans, just die hard. And it was unbearable at times. I remember Jake mentioning that some of his friends are Boston fans and all that stuff, but just being around them and watching sporting events is just the worst. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think I'm a diehard New York fan, but Boston fans just get me going. There's something about them. I don't know.
Yeah. I went to school in New Hampshire, and
right.
I was the New York fan. So whenever any New York team struggled or lost, even if it was, I'm not an NBA fan, but the Knicks were bad and they let me hear it. I was like, but I was just the New York fan in Boston territory. So anything against New York, it was just coming right at me. And it was, of course, when I was there, the Pats won 3 Super Bowls. The Red Sox won a World Series. The Celtics were good every year. It was tough. It made me dislike Boston sports fans more than I should dislike them.
Even more.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever go to the old Yankee Stadium? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the main differences? Because I never went to the old one. I went to the new one. There's a lot of glitz and glam on the new one. I mean, clearly they had an angle there, but to make it as extravagant as possible in some ways. What do you miss about the old Yankee Stadium?
I'll let Kumar take this one.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of memories from the old one, but I just feel like there was a lot more history in the old Yankee Stadium, because I think they built the new one in 2008, right before they won the World Series. And that was the huge grand opening where they won the World Series. And then the Yankees have kind of been all over the place since. But the old Yankee Stadium kind of has, you watch any old highlight when the Yankees had their dynasty in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's all the old iconic Yankee Stadium, things like that. So I don't have a ton of memories from the both and can't really tell you much about the differences. But when you think of the great Yankees teams, you think about old Yankee Stadium and those 90s teams.
Yeah, I felt like when I was at the old Yankee Stadium, I felt like you were a little further away from the field. They had the deeper backstop, and I felt like it wasn't designed for the fans as much to have a great viewing experience. And I've been to the new Yankee Stadium a handful of times, and I've sat basically in the bleachers. I've had good seats behind home plate and kind of everywhere in between. And I felt like everywhere I watched, there wasn't a bad seat in the place.
Yeah. The deep backstop was interesting because you had the deep backstop and then but behind first and third, like when the wall like right at the lip of the outfield grass, it was like the dirt was almost touching the dirt right from the corner of the infield. There was like 3 inches of grass between the warning track and the infield. It was an interesting. It was an interesting.
Jeter caught that ball in fair territory and he still dove into the stands.
Right.
For that highlight play.
Did he need to dive into the stands?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Running pretty quick.
I know. I'm just giving you guys crap. Okay, first full season for both of you last year. Kumar 65 and a third, Jake 72 and a third innings pitched. Did you feel like that was a grind? You know, I know both you guys ended the year in Arizona, right? If I have that right, I mean, all the days are kind of, you know, melting together a little bit. But did you guys feel like that was a grind your first full season?
Yeah, I don't think the innings represent how much Jake and I kind of put into the year. And I feel like every week Jake and I were throwing 60 to 90 pitches, whether it was, and for me personally, beginning of the year, I struggled to get past 4 innings. And I was throwing, the A's had a pitch count on most of their starters just because none of us really threw in 2020. But I felt like I was getting full workload week to week, even though I was only throwing four something innings every week. So for the first 75% of the year before I got hurt, I felt like week to week I was getting full workload. And then obviously I got hurt at the end and then got COVID. So the last month was kind of a blur for me and not how I wanted the season to end. But in terms of looking back on the season, I feel like it was very productive after not having a season in 2020 and was able to improve on some stuff and just excited to get back at it in the next few months.
Yeah, I feel like like you said, like I've thrown 72 innings before. Like I've thrown more than that in college.
I'm sure you guys threw more in college, right? Especially with summer ball thrown in.
Right. But like I've never been on the same team in the same place for 5 months straight, just week after week. And I think that was really like where it took a toll physically and, you know, and mentally. Just it's just a grind. And that was the first full season was something like you can't really prepare for mentally. Like you prepare physically for it, but like, you know, none of us have gone and played 120 games straight with the same group of guys and, you know, not taking a single week off. Usually in college, you get a week or two in between summer ball and, you know, and then it's kind of nice deload. But in pro ball, once you show up to spring training, it's every single week you're getting on the mound.
You feel like you guys learned anything about yourselves? You know, I'd imagine mentally you probably did, right? I mean, as you mentioned, you know, injuries and COVID, you know, plenty of pauses, you know, the end of the season. But, you know, either as a player or mentally, do you feel like the season kind of taught you anything about yourself as a player in both those aspects?
Yeah, for me. No, you got it, Jake. Okay, I was just going to say, for me, I mean, with the whole COVID year, I started throwing in October. And then by the time the middle of the summer rolled around, I was just exhausted. My body was tired. And so now that's only something I could have gained from the experience of pitching a full year. And so now I know I didn't need to pick up a baseball until a little later, just because it took faster than I thought to get my arm game ready. And also just getting prepared for 130 games from the minor league season. I don't need to be throwing that much in October. That's not going to help me perform in the middle of the season. So I think in terms of what I took out of that was just when to get prepared and ready to go in terms of timing, just because that is something I never experienced, and the full season kind of allowed me to figure that out for myself.
Yeah, and I think for me it was more like figuring out the mental side of the game this year. I felt like overall my body held up pretty well. I had one weird thing where I slept wrong on my neck, and that kind of made me miss a week. But other than that, I felt like I was like prepared physically for the season. I think mentally my season was kind of up and down, and it showed in my outings. I think, you know, when things were going well, I was riding the high of the roller coaster, and then, you know, it kind of fall off on me. So I think that I really learned a lot about how to stay even, not get too high, not get too low. And as a starter, you know, with like your routines and everything like that, I think that's the one thing I'll take into next year. You know, learned about myself as a pitcher, like on the field with my, you know, my arsenal and all that stuff. But I think more like as a competitor and everything like that, I learned what works for me and what doesn't, and what I need to do to be successful over the long term instead of just, you know, one specific outing. So,
do you know, pitchers often reference routine. This light keeps going in, on and off on me. I don't know why. This apartment building is old. There it goes again. You reference routine, and pitchers often reference routine. Position players do too, but the ups and downs of the season. Do you think that routine kind of helps you stay at with a constant attitude, if you will? I know the day after I start, I'm going to do this. I know 2 days after that, I'm going to do this. I know, so on and so forth. You have a schedule, or is that kind of a mental thing that you can't, not allowing yourself to ride that roller coaster, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like the routine definitely helps keep you on track. I think that having like what you're going to do every day is huge, and it gives you something to look forward to at the field, and not let you get caught up in your last outing. I think sometimes, like especially this year, we were going on a 7-day schedule for the first half of the year, and that's a long time to either sit on a bad outing and like dwell on it, or to kind of, I wouldn't say get complacent, but if you have a great outing, you can kind of lean on that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter 7 days later. So having your routine and knowing that like there's a goal and objective every day, whether it's your throwing program, a lift, your midweek side, whatever it is, it kind of helps keep you, like you said, keep you like even keeled.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like I'm definitely someone that's routine oriented in this off season. I like to do certain things, work out at the same time every day, eat at certain times, things like that. And so I brought that into the full season this year, but very quickly learned that, you have to create flexibility. Like, for example, when you're on the road, you're not going to be able to get into a weight room all the time. So you have to improvise and do things like that. And
right.
Meals are different here and there. And as the season goes on, you kind of have to listen to your body. So even though my routine in March might have been throwing out to 90 feet the day after a start, in August, I'm probably not going to be feeling the same way I was in March. So it was important to listen to my body and kind of tone it back when I needed to, and then kind of rev it up when I needed to. And so just make adjustments to the routine. But I think having a routine is extremely important over the long run to just make sure that you're maintaining certain things, but also being able to kind of make small changes here and there is super important. And I think we got very lucky with the coaching staff in Stockton that were vacation.
Did we lose me or him?
I think we lost him.
Uh-oh.
That's all right. We can keep the train moving here. Hopefully he figures it out. Also, yeah. I got a notification from Zoom telling me I have 8.5 minutes left. So, all right, we'll continue with you, Jake, until Kumar rejoins us or finds some Wi-Fi. One of the two. If you were just well, I'll start with this. How long did it take you to pick up a baseball after the season ended?
I took about 6 weeks off. So I got COVID at the same time Kumar did, because we were roommates and everything. So I got
like all you guys got it almost.
Yeah, a bunch of us. So I got shut down there for 10 days, and then ended up going back to Arizona to ramp up, and I ended up going to Instructs. So I finished my season a little bit later, around like the second week of October. So I took 6 weeks off after that, and then picked up a baseball right around Thanksgiving.
So you took a couple months off, then a few months, I guess, right around Thanksgiving. That would be, I guess a couple months, 2 months or so. How would you describe yourself to me as a pitcher? Strengths, weaknesses? There he is.
Hey.
All right.
Welcome back.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I could hear you for a little bit, and then it fully cut out.
All good. I was asking Jake to describe himself to me as a pitcher. And then then you can follow up, Kumar. So how would you guys describe yourselves as pitchers?
Yeah. So I think I pride myself on being somebody who attacks the strike zone, and can throw 3 pitches. Basically, the goal is to throw them whenever I want in any count. I feel like I'm going to compete on the mound, and whether I have my good stuff or not that day, just try to figure out a way to get outs, because at the end of the day, the results are the only thing that matters. Whether you're throwing hard, whether you're not throwing hard, whether stuff's moving, whether it's in the zone, doesn't really matter as long as you find a way to get results. So I think that I think that's a tough question. That's the best way I can answer it.
I think the first thing I would describe myself as a strike thrower. And like Jake said, I think what has allowed me to have success in the past is being able to throw my 3 or 4 pitches at any point in a count. And I feel like I got away from that at sometimes this year. And that's been something I've been working on in the past, and want to continue to improve on. And I'm working on a fourth pitch this offseason, trying to bring back my cutter/slider, which I got away from this past year just because as someone that's not going to light up the radar gun, having a fourth offering to kind of keep hitters off their toes is, I think, important and what allowed me to have a lot of success in college. So yeah, definitely as a strike thrower. And I think something that makes me successful is being able to change speeds. I know Jake and I always we talk about our changeup and things like that, and we had a lot of success with it. And being able to throw that pitch in any count is what makes my 90-mile-an-hour fastball so much more effective, just because of the change in velocities. But yeah, definitely would describe myself as a strike thrower, somebody that's not going to be afraid of a challenge. Never been one of the biggest guys on the mound or the most intimidating or anything like that. But yeah, just trying to be a bulldog and take it to any hitter that steps in the box.
Two of the best changeups on the 2021 Ports staff in this room, chat room, Zoom room, however you want to say it. That's it. Okay. So you mentioned the staff. How much did you like working with Chris Smith? I mean, what did you guys mesh well? He seems like a pretty easy guy to get along with.
Yeah, I thought Smitty was great. I got to work with him a little bit at Instructs in 2020. That was the first time I met him. And I was, when I found out I was going to Stockton in spring training, I was fired up that I would get to work with him because, I think he described himself as like a player's coach, but at the same time, he's not afraid to get into you when you need it. He's super easy to talk to, whether it's during the game, whether it's, when you're having a catch, and just super knowledgeable. And I think that the best thing is that he has some like old school tendencies when it comes to like working with you on like your in-game and teaching feel and that type of thing, but he's also knowledgeable on the new age of analytics and everything like that, but he doesn't get too caught up in it during the season where he like overloads you with information. So I think that was the best part about working with him.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. He would reiterate that the goal is to get batters out, not to, light up a stat sheet or have the best numbers on a certain metric and things like that. And so that was super helpful throughout the season. Was just the goal is to get the guy in the box out, not to do anything else and things like that. And I also feel like personally for me, someone who obviously my mechanics aren't perfect, but they're sound and I've been able to repeat them well. He was super helpful on the mindset and how to kind of attack on the mound, things like pitch sequencing and how to attack hitters and to pitch to your strengths and things like that. So yeah, I felt like I learned a ton, and a lot of that stuff has stuck with me, and I'll continue to use it over the next outings and stuff like that.
Isn't that super refreshing to hear, like, especially in pro ball, like, hey, your goal is to get this guy out, not increase your spin rate or whatever, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but from the press box, Jake, you looked like a guy with a good two seam, a guy that relies on downward movement. And Kumar, you're not a spin rate guy either, right? So it's like not forcing you guys to be somebody that you're not.
Yeah, I think that was huge. I think early in the year, as a staff, we really focused on throwing fastballs down and away and then elevating them and throwing like wipeout sliders off of that. And I think I tried to become that guy for like after bad outings. I thought that I needed to go to that. And then talking with Smitty, we changed the game plan and we said, you're going to attack inside with a two seam and throw your changeup a ton. And then my slider was my third best pitch. So, it wasn't wipeout. We're going to use it when we need to. So it was nice to have him tell me, to break it down individually instead of just kind of going with what works for most four seam slider guys. Instead, we're going to throw, kind of flip the script a little bit.
Yeah. I also felt like a big thing for me was him explaining that extra mile per hour I might get from adding a grunt or trying to let a fastball eat is not as valuable as placing that fastball on a corner. And so in the past in college, in my first year of pro ball, with later in the count, or I would just try to throw it as hard as I possibly could. And this summer, I kind of learned very quickly that you do that, you're just going to leave fastballs over the middle and they're going to get hammered. So throwing that fastball controlled and try not to throw it as hard as you possibly can is more effective if you're able to just put it on a spot instead of just leaving it over the plate for it to get hammered. And he was super helpful in that sense too.
All right. So clearly a lot of rules changes, a lot of experimental rules in Low A West this past year that you guys in particular as pitchers had to deal with. What'd you think of the pitch clock? How long did it take to get used to it? Were you a fan of it by the end of the year?
I was a big fan of it right away. I think it cut down the game time, like the average game time by like
Big time.
20 something minutes.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, there were times where it was annoying on the mound, but 5 games a week, I'm not pitching. And it was nice to be out of there, 9:30 every night, getting dinner instead of 10:30. So I was a big fan of it.
Yeah, I love the pitch clock too. I'm someone that likes to work quick. I get the ball and I'm back on the rubber. So for me, it didn't force me to change anything as part of my routine between pitches or anything like that. The one thing I will say is there wasn't much uniformity throughout the league. I'm sure both of you guys saw that depending on where we were in terms of ballpark and people running the pitch clock, the time would start at various points. Like in some ballparks, the clock wouldn't start until the pitcher caught the ball, or a different ballpark, it wouldn't start until the pitcher got on the rubber. And so there were a few times late in games where it caused some discrepancies where I think if they're to continue with the pitch clock, I think they would need to create more uniformity. I think Jake used the term like a shot clock, which I think is a really good way to put it, where the same time it gets started in every ballpark by every person that's operating it. But I think the idea is great. I'm sure there'll be some adjustments to the actual time between pitches with runners on and things like that. But the whole idea of it was I think, successful.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think the one thing. Oh,
sorry. Go ahead, Jake. No, go ahead.
I think like Kumar said, like it needs to be strict. There can't be any like feel with it by the person. It just needs to be black and white. And then I think they need to change the rules as far as catchers calling time. So like we had our pickoff rules.
I agree.
But the catchers, like a smart catcher, was calling time with 2 seconds left on the pitch clock to save their pitcher. But it defeats the purpose if they could do that as many times as they want. So I think they need to work out some kinks, but I think that was like the major one that I saw.
That was such an easy workaround, right? I mean, by what? Because they didn't really enforce it the first month of the year, I don't think. Like the umpires weren't really enforcing calling a ball if you went over the limit. But shoot, by like middle of July, maybe even the end of June, like catchers just call time as soon as the pitch clock got down inside of 3 seconds. I mean, that was the easiest workaround ever, right?
Yeah, as long as your catcher is paying attention to the pitch clock, that like as soon as you figure out to just keep an eye on the center field pitch clock as a catcher, and if he's still getting a sign at 3 seconds, just call time and reset. Yeah.
If you were to do a cut and dry, like this is when the clock, from you guys' experience, this is when the pitch clock should start again. What do you think is fair? Do you think it's fair to do it when the pitcher gets the ball back, or maybe when he steps on the dirt or on the rubber? What do you guys think?
I want to say when the pitcher steps on the rubber, but I feel like there could be a lot of ways to manipulate that. I feel like it would be very tough to say it needs to start at one instance. Mm-hmm. I think it should just be on the umpire's discretion, and have him kind of monitor it throughout the game, so it's not somebody else that's doing it up in the score booth or anything like that. But yeah, I guess when the pitcher steps on the rubber, when the ball touches the pitcher's glove, anything like that. But yeah, I can't really think of one specific time that would make it super easy to start the clock.
I think if you went with the pitcher catching the ball like in his glove, I think you'd have to give a couple more seconds.
Right.
But especially with a guy on base and especially with a guy on second base, I think the only time I felt like most of the time I was starting my delivery with 9-10 seconds left on the pitch clock. But when there's a guy on second base and you're going through a sequence with the catcher and then you have to shake off, then it becomes you're into that like 3-2-1 type scenario. Especially when hitters don't get in the box until maybe I think they had to be in by 8 seconds. Which is fair, but if your catchers are so used to waiting for the hitter to get in the box and then give their signs, that if they do that and the hitters are taking their time, gets in the box at 8 seconds, and then a catcher starts a sequence, if you're shaking off that sequence, you're not going to have time to go through another one. So I think that if you did it right when the pitcher gets the ball, you need to give a few more seconds, and then it's also just catchers and pitchers learning that you could give signs right away, whether the batter's in the box or not.
Were pretty much all pitchers a fan of it? I mean, you guys don't have to name names. Was there anybody that didn't like it? And if they did, how long do you feel like it took them to get adjusted to having it around?
I feel like there were no pitchers that verbally said they disliked it, but you could tell that some pitchers didn't like the fact that they had to change up their routine. And seeing that in our level makes me skeptical about it being implemented at higher levels with older players with more experience and things like that, just because baseball is so routine oriented in the middle of a game, guys fixing their batting gloves and doing certain pre-pitch movements and things like that. It'll be interesting to see the reactions if it does get implemented at other levels. And I think everyone was kind of just accepting of the fact that it's a new rule. We're going to have to deal with it and kind of just make adjustments.
And I think that if you take the minor leaguers, and even if they never implement it in the majors, if for the next 5 years, all the minor leaguers are used to working on a pitch clock, I think you'll naturally see when they get to the big leagues that they'll keep the same routine and the same pace.
That's a good point.
I think slowly it'll just naturally happen whether you enforce it or not at the big leagues as the older players, start to retire and the new players who are used to these rules come up. I think it might fix it. I'm not sure. I think it might fix itself a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, it had the intended effect, right? I think the Ports went like a month without playing a 3-hour game. I'm pretty sure that was the case, like late June into July. I'm pretty sure it was like 30 games in a row without 3 hours. So it definitely had the intended effect. You mentioned the sequencing, with a runner on second base. Did you guys ever use the pitch calling device?
Yeah, I think I used it for two or three games in August, I believe.
What did you think?
I was a big fan of that too.
You were a fan?
Yeah, I liked it. I think that anything to speed up the game and I wouldn't even say speed it up. Let me get in a rhythm as a pitcher. I'm all for. So like sometimes shaking off sequences and that type of thing can get you out of your rhythm. Where I remember working with CJ Rodriguez one game, and he would just press the button while I was like getting the ball back from the umpire. If it was a foul ball or something, I'm walking back to the mound and he's just pressing it while he's standing up back there. And, I'd get the sign and like, as I get back on the rubber, just give him like, yep. And then
I got it.
Spot. And, as soon as I took my breath, I was ready to go. And I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, I never used it in a game, but I used it a few times in bullpens, and I'm not someone with great eyesight. So I think it would be super helpful for me late in games, just when I can't really see the signs. And so if it's around next year, I'd hope to get to use it. Obviously decrease the chances of my signs being stolen, and also just makes it easier for me to know what pitch the catcher wants to throw.
How about the pickoff rule? I didn't really feel like that came into play a whole lot. At least I'm not on the field with you guys, so you guys would have a better idea. And I know, Kumar, you've got an extra wrinkle to that. I don't think now I can't remember if if you had to step. Did you have to step off this year? Or was that a different league?
No, that was high A.
That was high A. That's right.
Disengage from the rubber. So yeah. So for me, it was a lot of holding on runners. For me, doesn't involve having a great pickoff move. It's a lot of just timing. And so I don't think it was a huge change for me. It was actually the pitch clock affected more of that than the pickoff rule did, because a lot of holding runners on for me is holding the ball for a long time.
Right.
And I just had to be conscious. Exactly. I just had to be conscious of the pitch clock. So the pickoff rule didn't really affect how my game plan was.
I think I was in the minority during the year when I said I kind of liked it. I think it added like a wrinkle of like it added a little bit of like gamesmanship, where it added like a little bit of fun to holding runners on, because you pick off once and now it's like, oh, he's only got one left. Maybe they get a little bit bigger lead. Maybe they're a little bit more amped to go. And then it really it just added that strategy to holding on runners. Plus you had a pitch clock, and like I kind of like to keep an eye on the pitch clock to measure how long I was holding for. And then realizing when you should use him, and do you want to go 2 in a row? Do you want to go like one, kind of waste one to make him think that you're kind of don't have a good move? I liked it until I picked off twice, and then Zach Veen takes 2 hard steps. I hear step off, I step off, and he's standing back on first base, and he got me to walk. And then I'm like, all right, this rule's stupid. So little bit of give and take there.
That's a pretty smart strategy for a base
Such
runner.
a smart strategy. I wish we did it more. I
Yeah.
said it dug out to Kumar how many times. I was like, we should do that. Just get somebody else step off and be standing back on first base. It's a free base.
Right. Wow. These are the little things that I don't get to see when I'm hundreds of feet away. It just doesn't, that's an interesting strategy though. Do you think it had the intended consequence? Because I think the intentions of that rule were to force a little bit more action on the base paths, right? Did you feel that?
Yeah, I think so. Especially early. I feel like early in the year, guys were testing that a lot more. I think at the end of the year, I didn't notice it as much, but at the beginning of the year, it felt like every time a guy picked off once, like maybe the second time, like the guy was going. So I think it definitely resulted in more guys being a little bit more aggressive on the bases. And it also got rid of guys taking 4 or 5 kind of, half effort pickoffs and just slowing the game down that nobody wants to see.
Right. Kumar, anything? Do you feel like it changed the game at all?
A little bit. I feel like there were some people that might not have been stealing as many bases trying to go, but I feel like majority of the league, the guys that were stealing bases were athletes and were going anyways. Especially, I feel like in the lower levels, they just give them the green light, and those guys are trying to rack up bags and see who they can run on. But yeah, I do feel like it kind of just added a little more to that part of the game, which made it interesting.
All right, I want to end here, guys, kind of with your experience in Stockton. Just give me kind of a favorite moment on or off the field, however you guys want to take that. You had a few walk-offs. The one on the 4th of July was a lot of fun. But, if you guys have any favorite moments from the 2021 year as a Stockton Port, hopefully you're only one as a Stockton Port, fire them at
me. Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, there were a number of very, very fun walk-off hits to be a part of. But I think the overall experience that I took away from the summer was July 4th weekend. We got to wear the Popsicle uniforms. We packed the crowd for one of very few games that summer that the stadium was almost filled. And I got to pitch one of the days as well. And the whole fireworks show after the game, the whole experience was just a great weekend. And I think more of what minor league baseball has been in the past before COVID.
Yeah.
So that entire weekend was just something I'll never forget.
Yeah, I think I have kind of the same one as Kumar with 4th of July weekend. It was actually, that was the first time my parents got to see me pitch in pro ball as well.
Really?
Yeah. So they came out for that Friday night that I pitched, and then they were there for actually like 10 days, but their first 3 games that they saw were the Porch 4th of July weekend. And so they got to see like the best of like the Stockton Ports with the on field, and then obviously like a packed stadium. So like they got the full experience, which was awesome. And then obviously to get to pitch in front of them for the first time since college was great. And then the other one, I get them confused because we had like, I think we were down 12-0.
Oh yeah. Those were crazy, man.
Visalia?
Yeah. And then Campos hit the 3-run homer to walk off.
That was unbelievable.
That was the craziest baseball game. Like that just nothing made sense about that game. And that was like my second favorite besides 4th of July weekend.
I think it was 12-0 going into the 6th inning.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then I think you guys put up like Buelvis hit a 3-run home run, I think. And it kind of gave you guys a little bit of life. And you guys had done it like 2 or 3 nights before, I think in the opener of that series.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we had like a short porch grand slam to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. And then
TJ.
Yeah.
TJ. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was like a wall scraper.
Crazy week. There was that like end of July, beginning of August when we had those couple crazy comebacks and like a few walk-off homers. That was a fun time to be a Port.
I had a solid voice crack on the Campos game winner.
You'll remember that night for other reasons.
Yeah.
No, it was fun, man. I think it was my birthday too, actually, that day. I'm pretty sure that was my birthday too. I think it was August 8th.
That's cool. I remember earlier in the summer, before pitchers were allowed to stay for games, we were sitting out in the outfield in street clothes. Pitchers not pitching that night would go out in left field and sit. And we played the San Jose Giants midweek, and there were like 8 combined home runs and 100,000 feet worth of bat flips. And I remember sitting out there in the outfield thinking, this is not real. Like the wind was howling out. Everyone was hammering baseballs. It was not a good day to be a pitcher. that is another game that I will not forget, and thankfully didn't have to be a part of.
That's a great call. The Lawrence Butler bat flip will live in my mind forever. I mean, that thing would have gone, like, if he threw it backwards, it would have gone, I think it would have flew out of the stadium. I think it was way up there.
We were right behind the bullpen, and when he threw it up, you could see space in between the roof of the stadium and the bat. Like, it cleared the stadium, and that was absurd.
Yeah, there was that, and then Tyler stopping. Like, I think he did a little hesitation around second base right in front of Luciano. That was fun, though. You're right. That was fun. I remember asking Law about that because, like, when I was playing, if that happened, it would have been like, someone's getting drilled. But I remember asking him about that, and he was like, "No, man, we're all just having fun. Like, whatever. I don't know. Do you guys see it that way as pitchers?"
Well, as pitchers, it's a little tougher when, like, they're like, obviously position players, they're going to have fun. And, like, I don't hate bat flips or anything like that. I think it got a little bit out of hand in that game.
Probably, yeah.
But I am glad that nobody got drilled and, like, nobody, like, it didn't turn into a fight. Like, I'm glad that, both teams were able to have fun. But I am glad that it settled down after that game. And, we kind of – there's time and place for bat flips. And I think that sometimes you'd start doing it after every home run, kind of one-upping each other. It could get out of hand a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'd feel a little differently if I was on the mound that day. It was definitely fun to watch, but I also feel like that's kind of where the game is going. Maybe not to that extent, but like Major League Baseball is trying to promote fun, and obviously the stars of this game are a lot younger than they were a long time ago. And so hopefully a lot of the guys that were part of that game are the face of baseball in the future, but it's kind of just trending in that direction where you see more bat flips on TV and things like that. So
I feel like the attitude to that kind of changed with a Jose Bautista bat flip in the playoffs. Is that the Rangers they were playing? Do you guys remember that? I mean, obviously it carried over into the next year, but do you think that's good for baseball?
Yeah, especially given the circumstances of that. Like, that's just pure emotion. When it starts getting into like the choreographed, planned type stuff, I'm not as big of a fan of that. But when it's just dudes competing and like fired up and throwing their bat because they're fired up, like I love that.
Yeah, I think it's great for the game. I think it just needs to be a two-way street. Like, if the batter's going to be able to bat flip after a home run, a pitcher should be able to celebrate and, I don't know, yell at a yell or do something. That shouldn't be frowned upon because guys are bat flipping. It's kind of the same thing. Or after a nice play is made on defense, it kind of should just all be celebrated.
That's, Trevor Bauer obviously has found himself in quite a bit of controversy, but that is one thing that I appreciate about him is he does this little sword deal and, whatever. And that's a great point. Like, if the hitter should be able to celebrate, so should the pitcher.
I agree. Yeah,
absolutely. I found there's a kid I was coaching, and kid was doing the pitcher on the mound was doing the sword celebration, but he didn't quite have it figured out yet. He did the sword celebration after a strikeout looking on a kid. So the kids are definitely following in the footsteps, but they definitely got to figure it out a little bit as far as when to do some of the celebrations.
So that's pretty prevalent in youth baseball right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all over social media.
Social media has really, it's really helped amplify all that stuff.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right, fellas. Well, hey, I really appreciate the time. It's good to see you guys. Best of luck when you get to spring training and this upcoming year. And it was good to catch up with you, talk some baseball, and have a good rest of your off season. And hopefully I can talk to you guys again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us on, Alex. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it. This was a great time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Portside Pod. The Portside Pod is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms. You can also visit the Ports website at StocktonPorts.com and follow the Ports on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and other social media platforms. Until next time, I'm Alex Jensen, and we'll talk to you on the next episode of the Portside Pod.